Angola manages a curious double. Its capital, Luanda, is officially the most expensive city in the world to visit, but the country is one of the poorest. One reason for this is corruption. Investigating the financial interests of Angola's rulers is usually an impossible task.
Although the border's only just there where those signs are, a couple of 100 yards, it's not an easy place for journalists to go, particularly when the subject of our investigation is the son of the president and someone very close to him. Fortunately, though, we've got a huge pile of leaked data, sensitive financial information that throws a window open into that closed world.
Although José Eduardo dos Santos stood down as president after 38 years in the summer, it was to his chosen successor. Many believe the move was more about preserving power, not handing it over. In Angola, power comes from money and money comes from oil. And while he was in office, President dos Santos ruthlessly controlled that wealth. His daughter Isabel, known as Africa's richest woman, with an estimated wealth of $3.5 billion, was, at a stroke of her father's pen, made head of the state oil company Sonangol. His son, José Filomeno dos Santos, known as Zainu, was appointed to another position, again by the president. $5 billion of oil money was placed in a sovereign wealth fund, the Fundo Soberano de Angola, or FSDEA, and Zainu was put in charge.
The process was not transparent according to normal standards anywhere in the world, but what was transparent for the people of Angola, it was that the only criteria why he was selected, it was because he was the son of the president. He had no training, no experience, no special qualification.
The fund appointed a company called Quantum Global to manage its money. It's majority owned by Jean-Claude Bastos, a Swiss-Angolan businessman who's a close friend and at that time was a business partner of Zainu.
We see only one asset management firm in charge of a vast majority of the fund's assets. That's unusual. And it's unusual for a number of reasons. And the principal one is that funds want to hedge their risk. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You want to spread your eggs over a number of baskets. In general, with the Angolan fund, and I think this is true of a lot of the funds that sort of score poorly on transparency and accountability indicators, one of the things that they have in common is the lack of rules around who the managers are, how the managers are chosen, and what assets the fund can invest in and what it can't invest in.
We asked FSDEA how Quantum Global was selected as their main investment manager. No one wanted to be interviewed for this programme, but in a statement they said,
"The selection followed an objective process of assessment of firms able to support the fund in implementing a specific investment strategy defined by the Angolan government."
Mr. Bastos also told us,
Quantum Global was selected because of its track record of profitable investment management for the Angolan Central Bank during the country's recession when others were losing money.
Mr. Bastos first applied to manage the money from Jersey, but the authorities there thought he was too close to the president's son to be independent. We've seen the internal report into this application, which also noted,
Mr. Bastos was convicted by the Criminal Court of the Canton of Zug on the 13th of July 2011 of qualified cases of misappropriation. The offence for which Mr. Bastos was convicted relates to the failure to properly control the flow of monies in circumstances where he was on notice of the solvency, or lack thereof, of various companies in a structure he either held an interest in or acted as a director.
Mr. Bastos turned to another island to manage the fund's investments. Where it once farmed sugar, Mauritius now farms money. It's an offshore tax haven. And it's here that Mr. Bastos brought $3 of the $5 billion to invest in 7 funds he created. Using the services of the law firm Appleby based in this building in Port Louis, Mr. Bastos set up Quantum Global Investment Africa Management. Appleby, as you may have seen in the news, suffered a huge data leak of highly sensitive information revealed this week.
The leak was obtained by the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung, who shared it with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. The BBC has been researching it along with the Guardian newspaper. For the last 9 months, we've been putting together information from the leak with publicly available sources and talking to insiders. As a result, we've managed to piece together much of what's going on inside the management of the sovereign wealth fund's money.
The first thing to look at is the management fees Quantum Global was paid for managing the 7 Mauritius-based funds. Between 2 and 2.5% of the $3 billion every year. In just 20 months, the company was paid $92 million. Over this time, most of that money was not invested but sat in bank accounts. At the end of 2015, QGIAM had invested just $407 million of the $3 billion. At the end of 2016, that figure had gone up to $433 million. In other words, during 2016, an additional $26 million was invested by the 7 funds. Over this period, Quantum Global was paid around $70 million in fees.
So what we see in that case, is it unheard of? No. The question I'd be asking is the Angolan fund getting its value for money? If you're paying those types of management fees, you must be getting extraordinary service for that. And if I were the Angolan fund managers, I'd be asking, are we getting that extraordinary service or not?
Both Mr. Bastos and the fund say the management fees are reasonable. What happened to them, though, may, according to industry insiders, be an indication that they were set too high. Because of the leak, we can see that $41 million of the $92 million of management fees was paid out as dividends. In other words, it was profit. It went to a company called QG Investments Limited in the British Virgin Islands. This is owned by White Knight Limited, also in the British Virgin Islands, which is owned by Green Trees Incorporated in the Seychelles. And this company is owned by Mr. Bastos. Of the rest, $34 million was paid to another company, Quantum Global Alternative Investments, part of the Quantum Global Group of which Mr. Bastos is the majority owner.
So the documents that I saw reveal a complex financial structure, but they reveal a complex financial structure which doesn't on the face of it seem illegal, but highly opaque, that allows somebody who wants to hide gains that they are making, perhaps inappropriately, shall we say, rather than illicitly, hide those gains and hide who owns what company and who's receiving what payments.
The videos on Mr. Bastos' personal YouTube channel portray a dynamic entrepreneur with many financial interests.
Go out as you are a dreamer and follow your dreams. Be courageous and do not give up.
So what did Mr. Bastos invest the sovereign wealth fund's money in? During the 20 months covered by the leak, we can see evidence that he made 6 investments in hotels and infrastructure. But 3 of the investments were in projects in which Mr. Bastos had a personal stake.
For example, there's a $157 million hotel complex in Angola's capital, Luanda. It's to be built on land owned by Mr. Bastos and by a company owned by Mr. Bastos. We've spoken to an insider with knowledge of the deal who told us that Quantum Global appointed independent analysts to go over the deal. They concluded it wasn't a good one for the Angolan people's money. The projected returns were too low and the costs too high, and yet the investment was approved.
So, the difference between private equity and venture capital.
Mr. Bastos clearly knows a lot about making money. But what's not clear is why a man who was prosecuted in Switzerland, a man with a web of complex financial interests, was given the opportunity to make what appears from this leak at least to be so much money from the Angolan People's Fund.
This isn't bags of cash being carried into bank accounts in Switzerland. This is fees being charged here, earnings being made there to benefit, it would appear, one particular individual. Why is he in this favoured position? What connections does he have? Where does the money go onward from him and from his companies? At this stage, certainly from documents I've seen, we don't know. But there will clearly be some other connection that justifies him being in the position that he is in.
Mr. Bastos, though, insisted that the hotel investment was viable. He denied that there was any conflict of interest, saying,
"All shareholders' interests are completely aligned for the growth and ultimate success of every investment."
The FSDEA told us,
"Our investment policy authorises an initial period of 18 months, during which close interrelation and synergies between service providers are encouraged to increase the speed of the portfolio development and boost institutional reach."
Meanwhile, in Luanda, where a man skims a flooded crater for the mosquito larvae that cause yellow fever, malaria and Zika, it's not hard to see where the money could be spent. This hospital in Kazanga is overwhelmed by patients. Some have had to buy their own drugs and equipment from hawkers outside. These are the people the Angolan Sovereign Wealth Fund is supposed to be helping.